The year was 1934. The Great Depression had cast its long, suffocating shadow over America.
Cleveland, Ohio, once a booming industrial hub, had become a city of the desperate.
A place where broken men slept under railroad bridges, and entire communities were built out of cardboard and tin in what people called Hoovervilles. But amid the hunger and hardship, something darker was stirring, something far more sinister than poverty or despair.
It crept through the foggy ravines and alleys of Cleveland's Kingsbury run, a figure of death.
A butcher who stalked the forgotten souls of the city's underworld. He was never caught, never identified,
but his crimes left behind a trail of mutilation so gruesome,
so methodical, that they would haunt Cleveland for decades to come. This is the story of the Mad Butcher of Kingsbury Run,
America's forgotten terror. If you love uncovering dark, unsolved true crime mysteries like this one,
make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications, because each week
we dive deep into the case's history tried to forget.
It began in September 1934,
when two boys walking along the base of Jackers Hill, a desolate area overlooking Kingsbury Run, stumbled upon a horrifying sight.
Lying in the weeds was the lower half of a male torso. The head, the arms, the upper body gone. The flesh had been washed clean with a chemical,
almost as if someone had deliberately tried to erase any trace of identity.
Investigators scoured the area, but no other parts were ever found. The victim, they noted,
was athletic and healthy, someone who had lived hard labor, perhaps a vagrant or worker down on his luck.
The coroner could not determine cause of death, but the deliberate dismemberment,
that was no animal.
It was human precision, the work of someone who knew their way around a knife. The newspapers barely mentioned it. After all, Cleveland was full of tragedy in those days. But a year later, another body surfaced, and this time, the horror could not be ignored. In September 1935, two boys again were the ones to find death, this time on the east side of the city, near the same ravine.
A decomposed body lay sprawled in the brush, again decapitated. The head, later found nearby, had been severed with surgical accuracy.
Soon after, police found a second corpse just 30 feet away, also headless. Both victims were male, likely transients.
But this time, the killer had taken his time.
The cuts were clean, deliberate, methodical. Whoever he wasn't just killing, he was dissecting. By now, the press had a name for him. They called him the Mad Butcher of Kingsbury Run.
Cleveland's underworld trembled.
The city's poorest, jobless men living in shantytowns now feared
something far worse than hunger,
and the police had no answers.
In 1936, a third victim appeared.
The torso of a young woman was found, wrapped in newspaper,
and stuffed into two bushel baskets near
East 20th Street. The victim's head and limbs were discovered nearby.
The precision was chilling.
The coroner determined the woman had been alive when the beheading began. The newspapers exploded with panic. Another headless victim found, screamed the headlines. The public demanded action.
Cleveland's safety director at the time was Eliot Ness, the legendary Prohibition agent who had brought down Al Capone. Ness was hailed as incorruptible, efficient, and fearless. But even he was about to face something that would test him to his limits. By 1937, Kingsbury Run had become a city within a city, filled with the homeless, the outcasts, the broken.
Police patrolled by torchlight, wary of what they might find next. That summer, they did.
Two more victims were found in the same ravine. One was so badly decomposed he could not be identified.
The other, known only as victim
No. 7, was a man
who'd been decapitated and
emasculated.
Again, the cuts were precise, the work of a professional hand. At this point, the coroner began to see a terrifying pattern. The victims were almost always decapitated, sometimes while alive.
Many had been treated with some kind of chemical preservative, possibly lime.
Most were vagrants, drifters, people the city would not miss. Whoever the killer was, he was choosing victims who existed on society's edge.
Then came the discovery that would push Cleveland to the brink.
In September 1937, near the same stretch of the run, police found two burlap sacks floating in the water. Inside were human remains, thighs, torsos, and arms. When the coroner pieced them together, he realized there were two different victims, both male, both dismembered with extraordinary skill. Panic swept the city. The butcher wasn't slowing down, he was accelerating, and his confidence was growing.
Eliot Ness decided it was time for drastic measures. In August 1938, Ness ordered a surprise midnight raid on the Kingsbury Run shantytown.
Hundreds of men were rounded up, questioned, fingerprinted. Their makeshift homes, over 1,000 wooden shacks, were doused in gasoline and burned to the ground.
It was a brutal tactic.
The newspapers called it Ness's fiery cleanup. but it worked.
At least in one sense, the killing stopped for a while.
The last confirmed victims were discovered in August 1938. A woman's lower torso was found in the Cuyahoga River. Her upper torso surfaced a few days later. Like before, she'd been cleanly severed, but this time, something was different. Her body had been placed in plain sight, near a police station.
It was as if the killer was taunting Eliot Ness directly. Ness was enraged. He launched a new wave of investigations, interviewing doctors, butchers, and anyone with anatomical training. Dozens were questioned, a few detained, but no one could be tied definitively to the murders. Eventually, suspicion fell on a man named Dr. Francis E. Sweeney, a World War I veteran and surgeon who had served in a medical unit specializing in amputations.
Sweeney was known to drink heavily and had a history of mental instability.
When Ness personally
interrogated him under what he later
described as truth serum,
Sweeney's answers were erratic, at times boastful, at others mocking.
Though Ness was convinced he had his man,
there was a problem. Sweeney was politically connected. He was a cousin of a powerful congressman, and without physical evidence,
Ness couldn't risk a scandal.
Sweeney was quietly committed to a veterans hospital shortly after.
Ness, officially, had no suspect,
but privately, he was certain the doctor was the butcher.
Yet the killings never truly stopped haunting Cleveland.
Over the next several years,
a handful of similar murders occurred along Lake Erie and even as far as Pittsburgh. Some bore the same signature: decapitations, chemical treatment, careful dismemberment. Was the mad butcher still out there?
Or had he changed his hunting ground? The mystery of Kingsbury Run never faded. The official count lists 12 confirmed victims
between 1934 and 1938, though some investigators believe there may have been more than 20.
Each murder was an act of surgical cruelty, carried out with chilling detachment. The butcher targeted those society had
discarded, the forgotten men and women of Depression-era Cleveland, and in doing so, he ensured that his victims would remain anonymous, even in death.
When Eliot Ness died in 1957, he carried the shame of the case to his grave. Despite his triumph over Al Capone, despite his status as a hero of law enforcement, Ness could never bring the Mad Butcher to justice. The case remains unsolved to this day, one of America's darkest, most disturbing mysteries. To this day, the old ravine of Kingsbury Run lies quiet. The train tracks still cut through the valley,
and if you stand there at night, some say you can hear the faint echo of the passing trains and the whispers of the forgotten dead.
The butcher of Kingsbury Run was never caught.
His name, his face, his reasons all vanished into history.
But in every rusted rail and shadowed street of old Cleveland,
his presence lingers, a reminder that evil doesn't always come with fame or headlines.
Sometimes it hides in plain sight,
moving among the lost and lonely, choosing its victims from those the world has already forgotten. And perhaps that's the cruelest mystery of all. If this story of the Mad Butcher of Kingsbury Run sent chills down your spine,
make sure to subscribe and turn on the bell, because every day
we uncover another dark corner of history and the crimes the world tried to erase.
Tell me in the comments, do you think Eliot Ness really found the killer in Dr. Francis Sweeney?
Or did the Mad Butcher slip away forever? Your theories might just appear in my next video. Until then, stay curious, stay cautious, and remember, the shadows of history never sleep.